Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and we are here at KubeCon in Detroit. And today we have with us Deepthi Sigireddi. You are engineer at PlanetScale and Lead Maintainer of Vitess. First of all, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I have been covering PlanetScale and Vitess for quite some time, but since you are here, so I would since also you're a lead maintainer, hear from you also. Just tell us, Vitess and its history.
Vitess was started at YouTube to solve YouTube scaling problem. YouTube was running everything on MySQL, and they were running into issues on a regular basis because they just had too much data and too much traffic. So the founders of Vitess started building it to solve that particular problem, and they built it over time. What we know of as Vitess today did not come into being on day one. They built different parts of it over time. First, they built a MySQL management layer, a proxy to manage MySQL. Then they built sharding, which wasn't there in the very first release of Vitess. And from there, we are now at a point where many large companies run Vitess in production.
The fact is that today, a lot of companies, they're also facing the same kind of similar challenges that YouTube was facing back then. So talk a little bit about, in today's world, what are the challenges companies face and how Vitess and PlanetScale help them with those?
There is the same set of challenges that YouTube had, which, as you said, many companies face now, which is with scaling their database layer. The reality is that even though MySQL is 30 years old, many internet companies still use MySQL, and MySQL has its own scaling limitations. And that's when people who are already using MySQL end up adopting Vitess or PlanetScale, because what you can get with Vitess is that Vitess can run many MySQL instances behind the scenes to allow people to scale their traffic and also how much data they can store in the database while still being able to manage it. We know of companies that went up to like 20 terabytes on a single MySQL instance. You can do it, but it's not manageable. It's very hard to manage. So Vitess makes it easier to manage your data layer. It makes it possible to grow that database to much bigger sizes than you could with a single MySQL. It makes it possible to grow your traffic. A single MySQL can handle 10,000 simultaneous connections comfortably. Beyond that, there will be problems. But with Vitess in front of MySQL, there can be hundreds of thousands of connections, millions of queries per second, and it's fine. It's not a problem. So that is what companies like Slack, Square, GitHub, HubSpot, that's what they're able to do with Vitess that they cannot do with vanilla MySQL. Where PlanetScale comes in is that managing this sort of infrastructure is non-trivial, and the migration to cloud is ongoing. It started with basic infrastructure, computing infrastructure and storage infrastructure, right? Like Amazon, EC2 and S3, but more and more things are moving to the cloud. And many companies don't want to spend the people resources needed to manage infrastructure like Vitess, because ultimately Vitess is database infrastructure. So they come to PlanetScale, and PlanetScale can manage the database for these sorts of large companies.
In general, what kind of trends you're seeing? Because we are moving more and more towards data-centric. It doesn't matter where we look. We are not only consuming, but we're also creating a lot of data. So is this problem specific? Back in those days, it was YouTube specific, or it could be Flickr or all the companies who are dealing with massive one. But today, I think it's becoming a pain point almost a lot of companies. So do you think it's still a niche area, or you think that's going to be a wider problem?
I think it is definitely going to be a wider problem, but there won't be just one solution to the problem of data, because there are many kinds of data, and companies might need more than one solution to deal with their data. So Vitess is a general purpose relational database, but there will be other specialized databases that people will use.
When we look at cloud native, CNCF landscape, things get complicated very quickly, right? That's the pain point. When we talk about data, or something like Vitess, does it add to more complexity, or you try to make things more simpler because to lower the barrier for entry so folks they don't look at it as another roadblock hurdle?
Right. So making it more accessible to users and making it easier to deploy and operate is something that we very much want to focus on in Vitess. If we look at how Vitess has progressed, there was a time when people were running it on VMs and building their own tooling to manage their Vitess clusters. Now there is a Kubernetes operator from PlanetScale that people can use to simplify that process significantly, or they can just sign up for PlanetScale and they will get a managed service that they don't even have to run on their own. Beyond that, for the people who still continue to run Vitess on their own, whether with their own tooling or with the PlanetScale Kubernetes operator for Vitess or with their own homegrown Kubernetes deployment, which people do, we want to continue to make it easier to operate. So this morning we announced release 15, in which one of the big features is VTORC, which is automatic failure detection and recovery. And what that means is that people who are operating Vitess will have to spend less time responding to alerts on call, spend less time manually repairing things, because Vitess will automatically repair most failure conditions. There will always be a few things that require human intervention, and that's expected. We've also built a new web UI for Vitess. There was a previous iteration of a web UI which was pretty old, very hard to maintain, built on old tech stack. So we've built it up again from the ground up on a modern stack, and hopefully it is much more usable than the old one was.
We are kind of getting out of the COVID phase, right? But then there's a war going on in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. We are getting worried about economic slowdown, potential recession. So companies are looking at cost cutting. But what we have learned from COVID was also that a lot of cost cutting also made companies more cost effective. So when we look at, once again, PlanetScale, Vitess, or this release, how you make things more kind of cost effective, so companies who are looking at cutting costs, they don't have to make compromise in this area.
I think at the Vitess level, we have not actually thought about what it costs in terms of infrastructure in this release. But what it will help companies do is, if they spend less of their people resources managing Vitess, then they have more time from the same people to work on building their business functionality or other projects which can then lead to higher revenue. But I guess if you spend fewer people resources managing Vitess, then you are actually spending less money managing Vitess.
That was a point, that automate things, that's how helps a lot with being
right. And I think even VT Admin, the new UI, is helpful there, because what you can do with that is monitor multiple Vitess clusters. So you may have a development cluster and a production cluster. You don't have to switch between two environments. You can use a single UI to monitor both.
Now, since we are talking about Vitess and PlanetScale, can you also talk about the synergy, the chemistry between a company and the project?
PlanetScale is obviously built on Vitess, and under the covers, we are running tens of thousands of Vitess clusters. Everybody who signs up for an account with PlanetScale gets at least one Vitess cluster, and the core functionality is definitely Vitess. But what PlanetScale has been able to do is to take the core functionality in Vitess and make it very easy to start, and also add the gloss that is required on top of the core functionality. So one example is online schema changes. Vitess has online schema changes built into it. Anyone who's using Vitess, open source, can do them. So these are schema changes where there is no downtime, right? But what PlanetScale has done is that around the online schema change functionality in Vitess, at PlanetScale, we have built the deploy request functionality, which gives a Git-like flow to schema changes, where people can collaborate. One person can propose a schema change. They may require approvals. You can group schema changes. You can say that I want them to be all executed, but I don't want the final cutover to happen. Can I postpone that? And all this you can do from a graphical UI. Even though, for example, for postponing, the functionality exists in Vitess, and you can do it from the command line. In PlanetScale, you can do it from a much easier graphical UI. So another feature that we built at PlanetScale, which illustrates how PlanetScale is adding to what you can get with Vitess, is something called Query Insights. This is one of my favorite PlanetScale products. So at the Vitess level, when queries are being executed, there is a certain amount of information being collected. But what we are doing at PlanetScale is that we are actually storing that information over time and analyzing it and presenting to the user what are the queries that are taking the most time, that are the most expensive. Because if a query is inefficient, it actually translates into a cost. PlanetScale gives you so many billions of reads per month. You will use those up if your queries are inefficient, and then there will be an additional cost, right? So with Query Insights, you can see the top queries that are inefficient and get recommendations on how to make them more efficient.
Deepthi, thank you so much for taking time out today to talk about sharing the history of Vitess and how it evolved from that use case at YouTube to serve a large ecosystem there, and also the synergy, the chemistry between PlanetScale and Vitess. Thanks for those insights, and I would love to talk to you again. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. This was a pleasure.